Recently, or about a month ago by the time this video goes out, a friend of mine asked if it was true that there was an abandoned station on the underground called Post Office, to which the answer is yes and no. Yes, there used to be a station called Post Office, but no, it's not abandoned. Post Office is actually the name under which St Paul's Station opened. It was built by the Central London Railway and opened in 1900. It was actually opposed by the cathedral's authorities, who feared that the underground line would undermine St Paul's. The Central London Railway built the station to a rather unusual layout. The platforms were stacked one on top of the other. This was because the Central London Railway had a policy of following the line of the streets above, fearing that they might have to pay compensation to the owners of any buildings they passed underneath. The streets here in the 19th century were very narrow, and so the tunnels had to be stacked. Now, when I talk about this, people usually ask why everyone was so all-fired worried when the tunnels were so far down. The answer is, in 1900, the tubes were still a fairly new technology. The City and South London and the Waterloo and City railways were the only other completed lines, and the City and South London was only a decade old. The station was originally sited here by Christchurch Greyfriars. In the 1930s, though, it was decided to modernise it by putting most of it underground, as was the style at the time. The whole thing was moved a short way east. During the Second World War, while the Luftwaffe were engaged in their own form of town planning, the electricity control room for London and the South East used the old station. These days, the lift shafts provide ventilation to the tunnels below and are now topped by this building. Architecturally, it's not much to look at, but it's not much worse than the present-day St Paul's Station entrance. Zing! If you're wondering about Christchurch Greyfriars, by the way, it was bombed in the Blitz and it's now a public garden. The ruins are Grade 1 listed. All right, I hear you cry, not literally. Why was it called Post Office? Well, when it was built, there was already a station named St Paul's by the river. You would now know it as Blackfriars. So passengers in the early 20th century faced a rather peculiar situation where the nearest station to St Paul's Cathedral was not, in fact, St Paul's. In 1937, the railway station was renamed Blackfriars, and to everyone's relief, Post Office became St Paul's. Incidentally, the district railway station by St Paul's Railway Station was named Blackfriars right from the start. If you're curious, Post Office Station took its name from the fact that the General Post Office had their headquarters just down the road, on St Martin's le Grand. This had opened in 1829. Ironically, by 1900 this building was proving inadequate, and in 1910 they would move to Newgate Street. Fortunately, this wasn't too far away, saving the Central London Railway the embarrassment of having a station named after a place that didn't exist. So from 1937 on, there was no more confusion, right? Wrong. When Thameslink opened their line through London in 1990, they had a station called St Paul's, which did not connect to the underground at all, and was some distance away. In 1991, it was renamed City Thameslink. To add even more confusion, St Paul's Thameslink station replaced a British Rail station named Holborn Viaduct. So in just a few years, you had 3 station names on the same site. In 2014, it was proposed to connect St Paul's to City Thameslink via a foot tunnel, so presumably one would have wound up with a sort of bank monument thing going on, where there were 2 stations with different names connected together. Or maybe they could rename City Thameslink again, I don't know. So to answer the original question in full, the station now called St Paul's used to be Post Office. It was called Post Office because there was a station called St Paul's at Blackfriars next to Blackfriars. This St Paul's opened in 1886 and that Blackfriars opened in 1870. In 1937, St Paul's became Blackfriars and Post Office became St Paul's. In 1990, Holborn Viaduct was demolished and replaced with St Paul's. In 1991, the Holborn Viaduct St Paul's became City Thameslink because people thought it was linked to St Paul's. And in the future, City Thameslink may be linked to St Paul's. I realised this is very confusing, so I drew this diagram to help. Hello all, I hope you enjoyed this renamed tale from the tube. If you did, please do hit like, share, even subscribe for more. If you didn't enjoy it, I presume that's because you've made the mistake of getting off at St. Paul's Thameslink. Whatever your reasons for liking or disliking, I'll see you again very soon for another tale from the tube.